say regular quiz analysis, and then we're going to be going into CSS. I'm going to be talking today about basically an introduction to CSS, how you use it, and then I'm going to go through some examples on actually writing some CSS with you, and then we'll have a laugh. So what is CSS? CSS is basically kind of just like a way for you to style your web pages. For example, this is what you guys could have done last week, right? This is an HTML web page. It looks really plain. There's no formatting to it. And basically what it is it has some titles. Maybe some things are bigger text than others, so you put some H1s, and then you have some text, right, and paragraph text. And there's really no styling to this. There's no colors, and there's no formatting. What CSS allows you is to turn this into something more like this, right? And you can add backgrounds, you can add boxes, borders, and just position your elements correctly. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing today. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and one of the main reasons that we use CSS is we can separate our content, which is our HTML, from our actual design. So you can have someone who's doing the content, maybe it's the news, or just basically the text on the web page, and someone who does the design of the web page. And so the designer and the programmer can work separately. In good web design code, you should always separate your CSS and HTML. So basically when you want to change one, you don't have to change the other very drastically. And it also avoids a lot of repetition of code. So whenever you want a color font to be red, you don't have to go font color red everywhere. And I'm going to show you an example of that. Right here is just like a block of text. And what this does is it has a paragraph, and there's a lot of names of universities. And sometimes you really want to emphasize some names. For example, I want to emphasize UC Berkeley, Stanford University, and UC Davis. Okay. Well, there's a lot of repetition of code here, right? Because you see font color, pound sign F0, and then font color again, and the font color again. I mean, if we wanted to change the font color for all of these categories, which is names of universities, I mean, it'd be really hard, right? Because you have to go through. And if you imagine this page is, thousands of lines long, it'd be really hard to go through and change all the font colors. So, how we solve this is with CSS, we give everything a class. And you learned this last week from your HTML lecture. You can give things IDs and classes. So here we gave these names span, class, and university. So we call this a university. We call this block of text part of the class university. So whenever we want to give a style to names of universities, we can simply just say color, and then if we later want to say we want to make it bold as well, we can just add some styling elements to this class. Are there any questions? You guys understand what's going on here? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go into CSS syntax. So how do you write CSS, right? Question is, well, yeah, you first. This CSS is in this format. The left side is an example of a CSS document. So I don't know if you can read that, but if you see it on your computers, look at the selection on your computers, you can read it. But basically what it is you have a selector in the front. And the selector asks, what does my CSS style? Who is affected by this CSS style? Okay. And in this case, the selector would affect everything in body, which means everything in the body tag in your HTML document will be affected by the following styles. Then you have a property name, which is, what do I want to change? In this case, I want to change font weight. And then you have a value for this property, and in this case, I want to set the font weight attribute to be bold. So what this is going to do is change all the text inside your body and set their property font weight to be bold. Okay. And there's a lot of other properties and values that you can put in here. For example, if I wanted to change all the colors to be green, you can put color : green. And also note that every declaration is terminated by a semicolon. That's just syntax. That's basically telling you I'm done with this property value declaration. Move on to the next one. All right. Are there any questions with this?
Remember, you get candy, so don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Yep.
Is reflective usually a class too?
A class.
Instead of like body?
Yeah, you can definitely. We'll actually go into that later in the lecture. You can use names of tag. So image would work. A would work. You can also use class names. You can use ID names. And this is slides just for reference, so if you download the slides, you can look at this. I'm not going to go through all the elements in here, but these are things that you should know for CSS. I know it gets a little daunting at first. You go like, how do I make my font bold? Well, it's counterintuitive to think of font dash weight, right? Or make it underlined. It's actually text dash decoration. But this is reference. So it's really important that if you want to look up properties and values for CSS, you look it up online because that's where a lot of the reference is. So you don't have to go around and memorize all of these properties and values.
And also in this class, we'll be expecting you to fully separate your structure, which is the HTML, from the styling. So we don't want to see your code that you're making something like bold with a pure HTML tag, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are used to. Instead, we want to practice like good software design or whatever, software engineering, and like kind of separate the different parts. So we'll be expecting you to do like font weight, bold, or whatever if you want to use bold in specific sections.
What if you want to just bold like a specific word?
So you can mark up. You can mark up your text with like, is it called semantic? It's called like semantic markup. And when you want to, you actually shouldn't mix styling with the structure or something. So if you think something should be emphasized, there's actually a tag called strong, and it doesn't mean make this bold. It makes this is important, and then you can go ahead and style strong to be bold. Does that make sense? It seems kind of like going around it, but like what if instead of like making important things bold, you want it to be like red? Like then you have to go through and change everything to red, right? Or instead, if you did it this way, where you kind of did the roundabout way, it seems like really complicated just for one. Like you just want to bold one word. But think about if you have a huge website and everything is like you want like special important things, and then to be like bold or whatever. But later you want to change it to be red too. You don't have to go through every single example and change it. You can just change the strong and skip it.
And it's also important to note that basically what this does is it makes you think about why you're bolding something or why you're applying the style to something. There has to be a reason. For example, if I'm making things of red, there has to be a reason why this is red. Maybe it's the name of a university or a name of a person.
Yeah.
Okay. And also another point is that some web crawlers, like Google's web crawler, will actually look at your tag and it'll say if you made this strong or you made this H1, it'll emphasize that as part of your keywords for your website, and it'll make people visiting your website a lot. Make it so that they land on your website a lot more often.
Or if you think about accessibility, it's like if people would like screen readers or something, it'll like emphasize that part instead of making it bold. Like they have no idea what to do, or like it's just the styling that you apply. But if you use the semantic markup instead and saying, I want this word to be emphasized, it's not like the style of it, but that's the meaning of the word, then it's more accessible to wider out. So, yeah.
So for it to be strong, we just have to do like less than strong.
Yeah.
Close and then close the strong after the word.
Yeah.
It's not like span ID or class is equal to strong or anything like that.
Oh yeah, well strong is an actual HTML element in itself, and actually in most browsers it's automatically bold, so it's just as if you made the bold thing, but it's easier as if like if later you want to change something else, you can just edit that instead of like changing everything.
Okay, and then a second question, is there ever when there's two, like say if it's color and then you say white, comma something, because I noticed that for like font, there was one that was like font and you said how bad is Arial, sans serif, and I'm guessing that's like browser as like if the person doesn't have the font, it goes to the next one down.
That's what it means.
Yep.
But then like is there any other applications, like do you ever do it for say like font weight, font size, like
I think for most HTML elements, especially like colors, like all browsers will be able to support it. But when we go into CSS3, when there are like some properties like a text shadow or like gradient or whatever that some browsers can't support, we'll show you how to like layer them. So then the ones that can't support them will do the regular way, so that looks fine.
For now, it only applies to font family.
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, like the tag like strong, and I know they have like EM.
Yeah, EM is emphasized, so it's like the italic one.
Those are like predefined.
Yeah.
Can you create your own tags?
I don't think so, because the whole point of having this kind of semantic markup is that the browser knows what to do with it, and if you kind of like make up things as you go along.
But like you specify in CSS, like.
Yeah. So how you create your own, if you depend on what you want to do, inline and block elements. So you create your own by making a class, a span class, or maybe like a paragraph or a div class, and that's how you create. And that's how you, and then you just apply span class something to whatever you want to inline.
So like in the example we had before with the different universities, and you could span class equals university, but there's no, you can't make up your own like university tag. Yeah. Yeah. So like for now, like in HTML5 there are different things like articles and like headers and like footers and stuff, but for now, like to make sure it's compatible, like browser wide, I just use classes if you want to add something new.
Yep. That's what the span is for, basically, just instead of using your own tags, you just use span at your own time.
Well, there's subtle differences between span and block, but I think we'll go over them this lecture too.
Span
and then,
block.
Derek, you had a question?
Oh yeah. What's on the previous slide you have abbreviation like ABBR bracket title. Like, what is that? Is that like
Which one?
Oh, that's for so that's part of HTML, and you can that's a special type of HTML tag that's kind of for accessibility again. So if something is an abbreviation, when people like use your screen readers, it tells them how to do it. Like if it should be in, I always forget the thing. There's like an abbreviation and an acronym, right? An acronym is the one that like radar, where you say out, versus like NSA or something. So that you just specify what different things are. So like screen readers know whether they're supposed to read it out or say the letters individually. So this is a special HTML tag with abbreviations. So.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You can look up the HTML, like, you can look up these things like abbreviation and an acronym in the HTML specification if you're really interested. Just know it's for accessibility. Any questions? Yes.
What happens if you, like, you had, in that one example, we had the group university, and they all happen to be spans. So what if I made an image and made it class university?
It would not do anything.
Okay, so it just handles it by ignoring it.
Well,
there's no color properties for the image, but you're right that this, because we don't indicate a type for this, so actually the proper way to do this is span.university, because if you have everything, like, if you have images that are university class, this would apply to those too. But if you want it to only be like the span, which class is university, you put the type right before the dot in university.
Really subtle actually of what this will do if you put an image with class university here is that you have an alt text and there's no image, the alt text will be this color. That's really subtle. Okay. Any other questions?
Good round of questions.
Great. Glad you guys do have questions. Alright, so CSS selectors. Basically, I guess we already went over this with all the questions, but what we need to do is we need to basically select an element out of our page. We have this giant HTML document, and we need to grab the one that we want. Right? So how do we do that? Last week we talked about ID and class. Basically, we gave our elements IDs, like right here, or class names. And yeah. So basically the ID is like a tag, and then we grab it by doing this in CSS. Okay. The hash mark, my ele or whatever element. What that does is that says this is a selector. Remember from the previous slide, this is a selector. This is selecting everything with the ID my ele, and it is applying these styles to it. Okay. We'll go over ID selectors in more detail, but basically, remember to name your elements because that's how you select things in CSS. So that's one way you select things in CSS. So remember that IDs are used to identify one particular HTML element. So that means if you have an ID, something with an ID on a page, only one element can have that ID. Okay. Remember to make it unique for each element. It is invalid if you make more than one thing with the same ID. Classes are just the opposite. You can have one thing with one class, but you can also have multiple things with one class. Yeah. And so what that does is it gives it kind of like a logical grouping of things. So an example of an ID would be, if you were on Google's homepage, maybe the Google logo has an ID. Okay, there's only one Google logo on the front page. Maybe once you enter a search query, a class, each search query box is a class because there's multiple search query results once you enter an inquiry. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you have multiple IDs under a certain class? What do you mean, like if you made say 3 different IDs, so then could you put that in one class?
Typically, an element only has one ID.
Just invalid HTML, like if you don't validate it, if it has more than one, or if there are more than one element with IDs, and it might be have some weird quirky things when you try to select by ID, so there's multiple of them, and it won't fit one.
Are you talking about?
Like a different ID, like there's 3 different IDs under a class. Yeah. So if you have ID is if you were looking at a profile page and the class is profile image and it has Amber, Alan, and John, you can't do that. Okay.
Yeah, an element can have a class, both a class and an ID. And also an element can have more than one class. It cannot have more than one ID.
To specify more than one class, you say class equals and then class equals, or do you?
You separate them by spaces. So class equals something. There's spaces inside the quotation. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
makes
you
sense.
do class 1 space class. Any other questions?
You could give it a class and an ID.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So this is an example of a class and ID selector. So here with an HTML document, first thing is a paragraph with an ID description. Second thing is a paragraph with a class extra info. And third thing was a paragraph with a class extra info. So I have a selector, pound sign description, font color red. Who knows which one this is going to affect? You get candy. What does this style affect? Yeah. Which paragraph does this style affect?
The one that has ID description for the first one?
Yeah. And that one. And so the class one affects the second two. It does not affect the first one. Because the first one does not have class extra. We can also select by elements. So IMG will affect all elements that are images, all image elements, and P will affect all elements by P elements that are P elements. Same thing.
Make sure you know the difference in the selectors. So if you're selecting just an HTML tag, image or B, it has no, it's just it's the text of IMG, right? But if you're trying to select classes, there's a dot in front of it. And if you're trying to select IDs, there's a hash in front of it. So there is a difference.
Any questions? That's that. Right. And then we have the universal selector. What the universal selector means is every single HTML document that is on this page, I want to apply these styles to it. Okay, so this basically this would have the same result if you said H1 this, image this, P this, and then whatever. So basically it's selecting all the elements on the page. Yeah.
When doing bodies, it's do the same thing. You did body.
No, not necessarily, because technically, body is only one part of your page, right? If you have a head portion, you can also select your head portion. You're technically not supposed to put things in your head of your document.
How do you style things in the head? Because isn't the body where all the content goes?
Right, but there's a subtle difference that if you mess up and put something in the head that's supposed to be displayed text in the header, this will technically select it, and body won't. And also, this also affects your HTML. This is actually an important difference, actually, is that if you select this instead of selecting, if you select body instead of this, sometimes when you open your browser window, there's little padding on the side of your window, and then if you have one element in your page, the element won't cover the entire page because there's padding on the side. If you select just body, padding on the side will still be there, but if you select star, padding on the side will go away. So if you say like padding 0 or something like that, or margin 0, so this will actually select the entire window. Body only selects a little part. Like, it's a very subtle difference, but almost the same. Yeah.
So do all the other selectors, like the element selector and the class and ID selectors, trump the universal selectors?
Well, we'll talk about that later. Yeah. We'll talk about higher. Any other questions?
Did someone ask? Oh, I wasn't paying attention.
Okay. Alright, so we can also combine selectors. Basically what combining selectors does is it allows you to be more specific. For example, if I have a paragraph, if I want to select all links that are inside a paragraph element right here, we can do that. So we can say P span. So that means all span elements inside P. Okay. So this goes from top down, from left to right, top down view. P into span. We can also do. We can also select any way we want. We can also say dot description A, which will select this right here. If I had A outside here, dot description A would not select it. It has to be inside something, class, and then A. And then for P span, if I had a span outside this paragraph element, P span would not select a span that's outside this paragraph element. Anybody kind of understand that? What I like okay. What this is saying is select all spans that are inside P. Okay. And then this is saying select all A that are inside class description.
Yeah, and because it's a space, it means any descendant. So even if it's like multiple levels down, if you want only like the first line of, like first child, not first child, so first like line of descendants, you would do a caret, so like the greater than equal to that, instead of a space. So yeah, so this selects everything.
This selects everything that's, all the A elements that are inside something that's of class description. This selects all span elements that are something of inside a P element. I see a lot of confused looks.
You won't have to memorize this. Okay, so who understands this?
Yeah. If you understand this, raise your hand.
May or may not be on the quiz. Oh yeah.
Okay, so the P span, is that, so on this left side is how you would represent it in CSS, right? Like the P span is how you represent the span, so the first green box, the span within the P, that's how you represent that you want to edit the span within that P.
Yes.
But then my question is, why can't we write P space A? Why does it have to be dot description A?
It doesn't have to. It can be P space A.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
P space A will also, this is just a different way of expressing something inside here.
So at the same time, you can say dot description span.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's multiple ways of selecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amber, could you repeat what you said about the caret?
What did I say? Oh, yes. Okay, so this space right here, when you say P space span, that means you want any span that is inside a P element, regardless of how many levels down it is. So for example, if you had like multiple, so if you had if you had this div, so P, and then these things are inside the P, right? And then you had a div, and inside of that had a span, this would match that too. Even if it's multiple layers, so there's a kind of a hierarchy, right? So the A and the span are children of the P, and if you had something inside the span, like if you had another link inside the span, that would be one more level down, right? Should I write this on the board? Yeah. So if you had, so for here, so if you said P space A, this would select this A, because this A is anywhere inside of this P, right? But if you only wanted to write A, that's the phone. Oh, wait. Huh? Yeah. But if you only wanted the first level of children, So for example, this is only one level below P, right? This one is 2 levels below P. So if you only wanted this one, you would use the the greater than sign.
Okay.
So yeah.
How about 2 levels down?
I think you can just mix them, yeah. And also there are like they're like, the pseudo selectors that are like colon first child. They're like weird things.
There's
like,
a lot of
weird
things, but
you can say like P colon first child, and that only matches this thing, even if there are other spans down there, because it's the first child. There's like next child or like nth child. So it gets kind of crazy, but yeah. You want to be really precise with your styling.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Justin?
Yeah.
What you named Justin?
Yeah.
Got it.
Alright, so we have descendants. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you combine like several in a row on the same line of code? Like can I say like P span P, like I want span and P and
Yeah.
something like that.
So you can just chain them. So
In one line.
Yeah.
Alright, so that's descendants. What if we want something that's combined? That means I want, for example, if I wanted only a element that had the class info, okay, or P elements that had the class info. If something has a class info, I don't want it. If something is just a P, I don't want it. I want something with both. And so you just, it's basically the same as descendant, except there's no space. If you don't put a space in between, that means, so P dot info with no space, that means give me something that's a P element that's also a class, info. Dot means class. So you don't put a space. Notice that you can't put like A and P together, like an A element and a P together, P element together, because something can't be two elements. If I wanted A's that are class info, I would do A dot info. And so you notice that this first style right here, P dot info, only applies to this first line. And the second style, A dot info, only applies to the second line.
What do you mean something can't be two elements?
You can't have this be a P element and an A element. This is only a P element.
You have an element within.
Oh yeah, which is then like the actual element. The final element.
Huh?
You mean like you can't put P A class equals?
Yeah, you can't put P A class equals, because that would mean the element P A.
So suppose you wanted all paragraph, all things that are both paragraph and in a body. Would you just put P body?
And in a body?
Yeah.
So body
In a body would mean that P is a descendant of body.
Okay, well, I mean, not,
This only applies to elements that also have a class.
you can't do this with two elements.
This doesn't apply to still. This only applies to an element and a class. Or
element and ID.
element and
Like
ID.
you do like P and then the hash for ID, like P. Does the descendant relationship make sense to everyone? Like descendant is like parents, and then if you have stuff inside you, they're your children, I guess. It's kind of weird.
And does combine make sense to everybody? And grouped is very simple. It just means that you can have multiple styles at once, and you don't have to repeat if you want multiple things to have the same style, you don't have to repeat your style. You just separate them by commas. Separate your selectors by commas. Does that make sense to everybody?
So everything that's either A or B?
Yeah.
Yeah, A or B or C. Yep, that's okay. Questions? Alright, we'll talk about CSS properties now. These are actually just getting used to properties and what to put inside the brackets, what the curly braces. First one is border. What this applies is just make a border around your element. So yeah, there's a lot of options for borders. You can put the syntax for border is border colon and then the size of your border. So in this case, I want to make a 1 pixel border, which is the smallest you can make it. And then what kind of border, solid, dotted, or dashed, and then what color your border is. Yeah. You can. This sounds really complicated, but you'll get used to it. You can just refer to the slides when you're writing your borders. You can also say different borders. This looks like a giant block of text, but what this is really only saying is border dash top, border dash right, border dash bottom, border dash left. You can specify different borders. So if I wanted a border on my left only, then I would just say border dash left. If I only want a border on my top, and I want a different border on the bottom, you can say border dot top is something and border dot bottom is something. Okay, so you can specify what direction they are. And if you just say border, this applies to all 4 styles. Yeah.
So if you just say border top, then like the other 3 sides won't have a border, it's just going to be 1 line.
Yeah, it's only going to be 1 line on your top. Yeah. And I'm actually going to show you some examples. Right. So I have this HTML document that I for basically lab last week. Okay, this is my about page, and I'm going to show you the HTML for this page. Okay. So basically, what I've created in this HTML page is I have a table, and they all I gave each cell a class ID. Okay, so this is a table, and this side has one class name, and that's called the table. Called data title. And then this right side, I named it data element. Okay. So if I wanted to have a border, around each of these elements, I could only the left side. I could say data title. So I'm selecting the class and border, one fixed solid. This is flat. What that's going to do, it's going to make a border around each of these. Okay.
Exciting.
And then there's all these extra options that you can do for instead of solid. You can look over these later. Margin and padding. This is basically how much space is between your elements. For example, in this table example, if I feel like there's too much padding inside this, which is the separation. So padding is the separation between your border and your actual element inside. So if I feel like this is too squished in here, I can just say add another element, padding. That fixes it. And that'll push it away. Okay. So that's padding. Margin is basically the difference, the separation between your element and other elements. So it's not your element is separated by a border and the border is basically the boundary of your element. Padding is the space between the stuff inside your element and its border. Padding is the space between the border and other elements. Okay, so you can see an example here. This is the margin, div 1 and div 2. This is the margin between these two elements. The pad and this is the border. The padding is between this div and its border. Okay, so I'll show you an example. Padding does this. Separates it from the inside. If I do margin, it'll move it away. Doesn't work. So that's actually
So this picture is actually a little bit misleading. It kind of indicates that the div ends right here, where actually the picture should be I guess
div ends the border.
Yeah, so these are the borders. Imagine the border is the end of the div, not ignore the colored boxes inside. So margin is outside of the actual element, and padding is inside the element but before any content. Does that make sense?
Before any stuff that you can put inside. And hover is just an element that basically applies only when you're hovering over it. So if I had these are links, if I just said if I say syntax for cover, you just put a colon cover, and then say background color yellow. Every time you hover over it, it'll turn yellow. Okay, so that's just the syntax for cover. Alright, so this is specificity. Now we're talking about specificity. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going really fast. I'm running out of time. Does anyone have any questions? Alright. Now we're going to talk about specificity.
I can't pronounce it.
I can't pronounce it. Okay. Alright.
It's on the slide anyway.
So, what this is basically saying is, what order are the styles applied? If you have a style that applies to one element, and the element has this P, it's also a class para, and it's also ID my para. What is this? What is the hierarchy of how they are applied, right? P. If I say P red dot para blue and dot pound sign my para, and then you say color green. What color is the text? Well, I put it in green. That's because ID is always applied before class, is always applied before element. Okay, so element is very general, class is a little bit less general, and ID is the most specific. So the most specific is general.
Yeah. So that only counts if they're trying to contradict one another.
Yes. If they don't contradict each other, they'll just merge. And if we want to write our CSS, please.
Sorry, it just doesn't make sense. So let's say you want a whole paragraph bold in red, but then you want like one thing in it, like a different color. Shouldn't the more specific trump the?
Yes. With the more specific than.
Oh, is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Oh, I
more
see.
specific than trump.
Oh.
It goes from specific is the highest priority, and then less specific is the lowest priority. So CSS is all about separating your design from your data, from your HTML document. So we want to link our rules to our HTML document, and there's 3 ways to do it. The first way is the best way. It's called external style sheet. And what this is basically saying is that at the very top of your document, where you put your head, you can say link href, and then you can put a link to your CSS document. And you say this URL style sheet type text CSS, which is telling you it's a CSS document. Read it as a CSS document. And this will apply all the CSS styles inside style.css to your document. Okay, and this is the most common way to link a CSS HTML. Best practice, best way to do this. Okay. The next 2 cases I'm going to go over are specific cases you should sometimes do, but this is the best way. Inline styling. You can use some inline styles for your text. You can embed it directly saying style equals, and then you put CSS in there. You don't put the selector because the selector is here already. You just put the properties and the values. And what this will do is it'll apply to the instance. It's only used for single cases, so don't use this very often. If you really have only one element and it shouldn't be named an ID or anything that needs to have a CSS style applied to it, you can use this, but otherwise don't do it. And embedded style sheets, really also don't use this very much, but you can if you really need to. Style type text, top style type equals text CSS, and you put your CSS inside these 2 tags. And then what this is going to do is apply these CSS styles to your page. Okay? Better option is always to link to another CSS file. And actually, we're going to go over multiple style sources. If you embed multiple CSS documents in your web page, they conflict with each other. The last one that you loaded is going to be the one that's applied. So if they have the same style and they also have the same hierarchy. So if it's all ID, if you all have an element, some style applied to a specific ID, then the last one is going to be applied first. Yeah.
So if any of it conflicts, all of it isn't merged at all?
It is merged,
Oh.
but only if they conflict.
Oh, okay.
The only way this applies is if they conflict. If they all merge, then everyone's happy. Any questions? So, cascade order, the last thing. Basically, the last style wins. If you have multiple style sheets embedded, the styles that are applied, and there's a conflict, the last styles applied are the one that wins. And proximity means the inline styles will always beat the embedded styles beat the external styles. So that means if you have something from an external style sheet, like the link href, that will not take precedence over an embedded style which is inside the page. And the inline style, for example, this is an inline style, this will always take precedence over